Alrighty, good evening, everybody. Welcome to episode number 4 of GameSense. This is our 5th season. We're really happy to be here with everybody and happy to be on the show. So first off, I want to introduce a few people. First off, I'm Francis O'Rourke. I'm the host for tonight. And joining me tonight are our other hosts. We've got Ty from Team 319. We've got Evan from Team 5803. We've got Matt. Matt's from Team 174. And we've got our special guest this week. It's Brendan Simons, and he's from the Celtics. Brendan, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm the lead engineering mentor and co-founder of Celtech here in Hamilton, Ontario.
Awesome. Well, hey, we're really happy to have you, and we're glad that you're on the show. And congratulations on your win up in Ryerson this weekend. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I want to thank one more person behind the scenes. We've got Stephanie directing. Stephanie, thank you so much for doing all the directing stuff for us. If you're watching us live here, we're taking your questions in the chat. During the show, we're going to bring up your questions. We'll talk about them and answer them for you guys on the show. So if you've got something you want to ask us, type !Q and then your question into the Twitch chat. And then what we'll do is our crack team of experts will come and pick them out of the chat, send them over to us, and if we like them, we'll answer them live on air during the show.
Don't you mean expert team of cracks?
Yes, expert team of cracks, something like that, yes. Last thing, though, I just want to let everybody know that we don't take ourselves too seriously, and we hope that you don't either. Have fun, and if you don't like what we have to say, go out there and prove us wrong. All right, well, it's basically the hump week of the season here. We're coming into week 4. Season's kind of cresting, coming to the peak before we get toward the halfway point of championships here. And a lot's been happening. So first I want to kind of talk about how this game works differently or perhaps the same between qualification matches and elimination matches. So, Brennan, I know that you guys played a lot of matches this weekend. You were a district. You played your 12 qualifications and all the way through the finals of eliminations.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on how this game plays the same or differently between quals and limbs?
Between quals and limbs, I think some of the things you can get away with in quals, we found are a little bit harder to pull off in limbs. The scale battles get a lot harder. The home switch / away switch battles for offense and defense get harder. As you might expect, everything's a lot tighter. So, there are other matches and quals where we were able to win with sort of going a couple cubes up on the scale and ignoring it, or taking a long time to do our partner climb. But we really had to be firing on all cylinders. I should say, though, that one thing we learned pretty hard was we had to score fast at the beginning. We lost a really tight match going up against Merge Robotics, who came in on the second seed alliance, and finished finalists who were just, came out of the gates faster and scored faster than us, gave us a real wake-up call that we carried on into playoffs. So that was a good lesson to learn.
Cool. Well, Evan, you guys also tied a deep run. What was your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think Brendan kind of nailed it on the head there. The biggest strategic changes that I noticed, it is definitely possible to play defense in this game, and not just switch defense, but actually robot to robot, get in the way, push each other around defense. And you typically don't see a whole lot of that in quals, just because it's really hard to pull off a strategy like that with all of the penalty zones, with random alliance partners. You need a lot better coordination to do that. And so that starts to come out in the playoffs. The other thing is that it's pretty atypical to have, at least at our event, it was pretty atypical to have 2 robots scoring on the scale in qualification matches. For the most part, unless you really needed it to try and beat one good scale robot on the other alliance, the better of the 2 was going to go, take control of the scale. And the other one was maybe going to put 1 cube on to help out, but then go do off to go do other tasks throughout the match and kind of lock down everything else. And once you get to playoffs, it's a battle for the scale all the way through. And whether or not you continue to keep 2 robots on the scale throughout the match, everybody was started with 2, their best 2 scale robots, going and placing cubes or what have you, right from the outset.
I think the interesting part about this game as it goes on like within a competition, but also as it goes on throughout the whole season, is the more competitive the match is, the higher level the match, the lower the scores are going to be. Which is kind of backwards for me. We were at in the semifinals at North Shore, and one of the 133 coaches came up to us and they were like, "Hey guys, that was a great semifinal match. We're only about 20 points away from the theoretical max score of this game." And I was like, "Oh, cool. Sounds like we've got this covered. All we have to do is just keep doing that, and then we'll win." And then we get into the finals and we're against, somewhere the 4 best scale bots made it into the finals. I don't know how it ranks 1, 2, 3, and 4, but all of a sudden, like, all of our scores went from like the 500s to the 300s, and it was just a battle of like, where can you find the advantage?
Yeah, I think we had our first quarterfinal match out. We got a little bit distracted with the scale. Our alliance with number one alliance, Apex Robotics with Skunkworks 1983, and the opposing alliance didn't really have any good scale robots to contend with us. And so Apex was going off, we put a few on the scale and then went off and did our thing. And Skunkworks, just from bad, it was kind of poor coordination, as is sometimes happens with the first run of a new alliance. They put way more cubes on the scale than we needed. And in the process, we're not paying attention to the fact that our opposing alliance captain Tread was an extremely good switch defense robot and had taken our switch for most of the match. And had they not had a mishap and died in our platform zone and gave us 2 free climbs, we would have lost our first quarterfinal match. So that was another thing that, like, there's a really tightrope balance in matches about when you need to be going for the scale versus when you need to stop going for the scale to make sure that you don't lose to the team that stopped going for the scale and went off to do other things. We actually talked about this literally last week, and then it happened to my team. So fortunately, we recovered from that and had a really, really great second quarterfinal and made it into semis pretty easily. But
Cool.
you make one misstep there, and you can go home.
Right. Yeah, that's certainly true. I mean, we expect the game to get a lot more competitive as we go to eliminations. I'm actually kind of more curious to see how other things kind of react to part of this, right? For everybody here, if you didn't play in the eliminations, you definitely saw a lot of them. How does autonomous work in eliminations? I know that from what I saw, a lot of the time teams were really focusing on the switch in quals, but once eliminations hit, the switch seemed to be a lot less important to me as far as autonomous goes. What are your guys' thoughts? Matt, do you have a thought on this one?
Yeah, there's definitely some, for not to make a pun, but there's definitely some switches that you see happen with autonomous modes in the playoffs. See what I did there? So
Thanks, Dad.
in the qualification matches, it turns out that showing that you have an autonomous is a big deal. And then when you move into playoffs, all of a sudden you start seeing autonomous modes that you didn't know a team had and didn't see a team practice. And the ones that I'm thinking of that I saw at the Finger Lakes Regional were 2 cube autonomous modes at the scale, because then people started to know that any few second advantage that you could have at the scale could really swing a match because of the time that needed to be made up to get that balance back out again. This game is also very well designed, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is in qualifications, rankings can either go really well or really bad based on the partners that you have. So if you're a typical middle of the road team where you can do some things of the game, but your partners aren't doing too much, it's hard to win a match when you're facing decent robots on the other side of the field, because one robot can't keep up with 2 or 3. It just doesn't work. And then when you move into the playoff rounds, you have robots that are all working together and doing that. So you see a lot more strategy coming out in those matches. But yeah, autonomous modes, there's typically one robot that I saw anyway that would deal with their alliance switch, and then the other two would be either doing something with the scale or getting a second cube on the switch. And those aren't things you necessarily saw in qualification matches.
True. Brendan, what was your guys' strategy from like an autonomous standpoint? I unfortunately I was at an event. Well, I was good, happy to be at an event, but I didn't get to watch your event up in Ryerson. So what was your all's plan during qualification or between qualifications and eliminations for autonomous modes?
You're right that the strategy changed, but not insofar as what we played. Mostly because we have one. Scratch that. We got two. We have a drive forward, but you know we were a little late getting things together as we have been in years past. So we really perfected the weekend before comp our switch auto, which starts in the middle and does the S curve and lands the cube in the proper side of the switch. That we used over and over and over again. We were the most consistent by our stats. Switch scorer in auto, and that became really, really important in playoffs because we faced in both semis and finals really, really strong. I'm going to call them every bot cycle teams. Not all of them were every bots, although one of them was. So 7200 in semifinals and makeshift in 4039 in finals, both like 3-second cycles on their away switch, on our home switch. So we needed to get a good solid lead of cubes on the switch so that we could hold them off. And so getting that auto point is more important, more than just the 2 points per second in auto. It's to keep that lead into teleop when you're facing a strong attack.
Okay. I think attacking the opponent's switch is, as the scale battles get tougher and tougher, attacking the opponent's switch is what, like, basically, like when we get into district championships and that third robot that you have in the finals is going to be much more capable. So you're going to be able to switch things up a lot more. So yeah, I agree. I think everybody's like talking about these scale autos and these double scale autos, and I think Einstein winning alliance is going to have multiple cube autos for both switch and scale for sure.
Yeah, big drama element to it too, right? I mean, I was in a crowd where our team wasn't competing in playoffs, and it is watching the robots, because these cubes are big, watching the robots move them, and then they successfully get to the spot, but they haven't released it yet. Like the crowd really gets into that, and then like overshooting the scale and it flies over or it bounces off and all of those sorts of things. It really makes for a great dramatic element to this game. And you can feel how strong people really need those points, and everybody feels that emotion with the whole team. It's pretty cool to watch when you're in playoffs.
Yeah, Evan, do you want to tell us a little bit about overshooting the scale in auto?
I mean, before I talk about that though, I think Matt's got a really great point. That this is a game in which, for the most part, every cube matters, especially in close playoff battles. And so, yeah, when you miss a cube, it hurts. It hurts your alliance. Or when your opponents miss a cube, you do a little silent fist pump inside because that was time that they lost, that you're gaining points and they're not. So yeah, we have Apex has a shooter, and we had some accuracy issues this weekend. We are fortunate that in addition to the shooter, we also have the ability to extend and place it instead. And we ended up switching to that strategy probably later than we should have. We started doing that on Sunday, on the last day of the competition, in our last two qualification matches. And so the first shot was usually pretty good, although if we hit the wall too hard in autonomous, we would bounce the cube into a position where it wouldn't shoot straight. But yeah, I mean, there were times where there were definitely matches where we should have, or we could have won a lot more easily, or won it all if we had gone up and placed instead of shooting. So that's something that we're looking at. Those cubes are absolutely critical.
Yeah, and actually, that kind of brings us to one of the questions that someone in the chat just posted for us here. We had a user, by the way, if you have a question for us, hit it up with !Q in the chat, and we'll put it up on screen. This one comes to us from Azatoth_ here. He asks, what's more important for evaluating scale bots? The speed of the first cube or the first couple cubes, or their ability to build the second or third layer of cubes? Or even just more general cube management, I guess I would expand that too. Brendan, you're up in Ontario, which is like one of the most competitive places in the whole world. What are your and your team's thoughts going into the season with that?
It's going to change. It's starting to change. You know, in week one, a lot of teams were able to win with switch bots and getting sort of one scale robot on the alliance. This was the first weekend, I think, where we had to have 2 scale bots to clinch the win. And I'm really looking forward to this weekend's coming matches at Waterloo and at York to see like what some big scale bot battles look like. I can tell you what we did for scouting. We just counted cubes, right? So if the more cubes you got on a scale, especially in the big battles, then that answered the question: did they go fast, and did they get to the second layer? So just how many cubes did they move up? More sophisticated scouting, I think, would tell you whether they got there faster than others. But it was a good proxy for us.
I'm so jealous of you guys. Like in week one we went to Central New York, and we had four. In finals we had 4 scale bots all competing and putting up 6 to 12 cubes on the scale each side per match. And then
good for you.
And then in North Shore, we go to the finals, and it's 6 to 12 cubes on this, or it's probably more like 8 to 14 cubes on the scale each side per. So, for me, from what I've experienced so far, getting that first cube on there is important, but there are 145 seconds in each match, and that's 145 points, and 155 if you count the boost. So yeah, if you can get a few cubes up there quick, that's going to help, because it's much harder to catch up to somebody on the scale battle because you have to outpace them by that much more. But if you can't keep up with them, and by 1 minute left into the match, now they're ahead of you, and your rate has dropped so much, then that's 60 points that you're giving up. So for me, it's if I was looking at an alliance, or if I was looking to make an alliance, I think it would depend very much on what my capabilities are. If I'm a fast scoring robot, then I need someone that can help close out the end game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you need both, right? And they both have spots in this game. If you're at least what we've observed so far, and it'll be interesting to see how this progresses throughout the season. But for the most part, we have not seen a whole lot of matches where there's 4 scale robots going for the scale until all the way to the end of the match. At some point, somebody, usually the team that's ahead, breaks one of their robots off to go do something else, whether it's the switch, whether it's the the exchange, etc. Now, as you start getting more and more capable third partners that enable you to continue to place on the scale, we'll see how that plays. But I getting the scale control early is extremely important, and gets you to a point where you can break off one of your scale robots. And even if your remaining scale robot is a little bit slower than the combined speed of the other two, the other alliance, if you're ahead, that still buys you time until they've taken it back. So yeah, Matt, you've got something to add to this?
Yeah, I would say from where I come from, watching Finger Lakes and then visiting Ty and seeing Central New York, it's kind of hard to answer this question, because when you're evaluating the teams, you're evaluating them in qualifications. And in qualifications, you don't necessarily need that many cubes. You find it, or at least what I've noticed is, after 4 or 5 or 6 cubes, the other alliance eventually says, you know what, I can't keep up. I'm going to try and make up the points somewhere else. So it's almost like you're evaluating them on how fast they can get them up there, but maybe not necessarily how well they can actually stack them. And that's something that I really saw at Finger Lakes was there were teams that were really good at getting the elevators up quick and getting the cubes up quick, but didn't have a way to place them nice and gently to try and massage them into the place they really needed to sit. And
Mhm.
it's just hard to answer the question because you might not necessarily see that in qualifications until you really have a battle going on where teams can keep up with each other on opposing sides.
Yeah, and actually, Matt, you are my favorite host on the show after Brendan, of course, our guest, because that is a perfect segue into our match of the week here. We're going to bring up final match number 2 from the North Shore District, which Ty competed in which Ty's team did a fantastic job of this. Ty, can you kind of walk us through this match as we go?
Sure. So 133 had a 2-cube auto that they were running, so we let them take the scale, and then we ran what we did in Central New York, in that we ran our auto, and then tried to grab another cube and get as close to the scale as possible. So we knew this was going to be a tough one. We're going against 238 and 125, who already have a lot of cube stacking under their ability. So what we did is we split the field. 133 would go far, and we would stay near, and so you saw a little switch there just because it was easier for us to grab a cube while 133 played. So now we're just playing our positions here, and we're trying to get the cubes on as fast as possible because we know that if we slip up just a little bit, then this blue alliance is going to be able to attack us really well. So then 133 over here gets stuck behind 6731, which kind of forces us to kind of go on our own and stack as many cubes as we can. At this point, we realize that we're running out of cubes, 238 or 125 had snagged ours, so we had to go over to our pile and grab what we could.
And can I just interject here real quick that like you guys should watch 319 put the cubes up here. It's like this operator is an extension of his hand, not just a robot on the middle of the field. He's doing an incredible job putting these on the scale.
Thanks a bunch. Yeah, we put a lot of effort into the control for our collector and spitting out. So at this point, 133 gets free, and 133 we know that they can maintain the lead here. So we break off and we start making sure that we get the levitate if we can, and try and fill as many and help 1295 fill the vault as much as possible. So we know that we're over 100 points ahead. So 133 actually called us off and said that, oh, we'll take care of the climb. But then they get stuck, so we come over here, try to draw some tech fouls, and they're still stuck behind here. This is actually really frustrating defense to play against because it's technically not blockading, but you would have to go all the way around that switch in order to get around. So now you see here, this wasn't the game plan, so my drivers kind of panicked a little bit, and I broke our wrist and drove up, and then we broke an encoder. So when we went to go climb, Bob decided that we were far enough ahead and we didn't need to climb anyway, so he jumped all the way back down to the platform.
Nice. Well, a good strategic move there to for easier reset for match number 3, and just in case, you never know.
Yeah, we it was really tough because one of my mantras when I'm being a drive coach is that slow is smooth and smooth is fast, and it's I always make a very big point to like point out when the kids are rushing. So if my drivers rush and they do something, then at the end of the match I'll be like, we did this because you rushed, so you need to just take your time. So I immediately went into like, don't do that, you rushed. I can't believe that was like the worst rushing I've seen all competition. And then I looked at the score and we had won, and like all of it went away, and I was like, this is fine, we'll fix this.
It's fine.
Yeah, this is fine. No problem here. All right. So, Asthar, thank you for that question and for managing to guide it right into our match of the week here. We're going to move on, I think, to another topic here that I kind of want to talk about, and especially with Brendan here, who literally carried 11-14 this weekend a few times, possibly to victory. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about extra RP and climbing and all that kind of stuff. Brendan, tell us about why you guys decided to go with a single buddy climb the way you did, as opposed to either just as one of JVN's many lists of different kinds of climbs, just being out of the way, or doing one of the other solutions that are out there.
I love all of the different solutions that are coming out to the problem. I was joking around in week 2 that this is the secret second game piece is other robots. Like there's just all kinds of ways to lift people. We looked at it really carefully in our game analysis. We had a great game analysis this year. And we said the one that's going to get us an RP every match is where we pick up the kit bot, right? Where we just take ourselves and one kit bot and we can have a dead bot on the field, and that's how we get that ranking point every time. I recognize on JVN's blog there were a couple extra levels above that in terms of going out and grabbing a dead robot. That's really cool too, but we decided to kind of limit it there. The hard part for us was week 3, the whole design was going slowly. This is a pretty complicated robot for us, pretty ambitious for us. So we dropped the buddy climb. We dropped the ramp. We left a 6-inch space in the back of the robot and a kind of a vague idea of where it would go, and said we'll come back to it after bag day. So I'm really proud of our team that we did. We did it with 5 pounds. That's all we had left for the ramp and the hanger hook and the 6-inch space. But you know what? That just all came together because we, as I said, we're still learning. It was our first match. Some of the people there, first event, I should say, some of the people there were on their second. They came a little bit faster out of the gate. So we lost. We got a 0 RP match when we didn't expect to, and got us stuck down in 8th, 7th, 8th, 9th seed for the good part of that first day. And it was really frustrating with 10 matches in that day just to see us stuck down there. But once we started locking in those 4 RPs, we were the only team who were consistently getting 4 RPs. Then we were able to climb back up to first and put us in a good position to pick the best scale bot there, which was 14, and build a pretty dominant alliance with the greatest thing with our board mates, our rookie team, 6878 SJB Odyssey, who work out of the same workshop as us. So they were just perfectly, they landed right in the right spot, and it wasn't a charity pick two. They were exactly where we wanted to be. We thought they'd be a little higher picked. They filled up the 9 cubes into the exchange within the minute and used the rest of the time to sort of block the attack against the home switch. So they just did a phenomenal job, and we're proud to have them.
That's actually pretty awesome.
Yeah, it felt really good.
Incredible 24th pick.
Oh yeah. So I guess when this weekend I was at the Springs, the Chestnut Hill District event in Mar, or First Mid Atlantic, whatever it's called. And this weekend there was only one robot that had any sort of buddy climbing device, which was they had some ramps. But I saw a lot of robots actually out there with basically a winch that they would hook on, drive away, let somebody else grab onto, and winch 2 robots up that way. That seems like an effective solution in some respects, but like you were saying, Brendan, it leaves you dependent upon your partners. You have to be able to get that really good robot, and this ability to sort of drive away a little bit and let somebody climb have 2 robots climb at the same time worked really great in eliminations, right? And during eliminations, we saw double climbs all the time, no failures, no issues. But during quals, it was extraordinarily rare to see anything like that happen, even with the ramp robot that was there. It was really, really challenging to get robots up that way.
We're really concerned about whether the ramp game will change going into week 6 and district champs and world champs. As more teams with secure climbers are there, the time it takes to line up on a ramp might be a hindrance. We watched last week, and team 1305 from North Bay, they have a buddy bar that hangs out the side of the robot, and they were able to land some climbs in finals within like 4 seconds or something remaining. And for us, it takes almost the full 30 seconds to line up, right? So we're thinking about that trade-off in quals with the ramp. It's so great to get a ranking point no matter what kind of robot you're with. But in playoffs, if you swap that out for a buddy bar, a hanging bar, or maybe a rope or something, you can land those last-minute climbs that might be clinch.
Yeah, I know. On Apex, we don't have any kind of specific buddy climb system. We're designed to climb out of the way, be a selfless climber as much as we can. The geometry of a robot makes that a little bit challenging, but we climb on the sidebar and basically go straight up, don't swing in towards the center, and curl the base. And so we had a couple opportunities this past weekend to get climbs with other robots, either like Brendan mentioned, with detachable hooks and ropes, so they would hook first and then move away, for us to hook on and go up, or with other side climbers. And we were never able to get it to work in 4 opportunities in quals. We we did successfully do it in our 2 practice matches with a team that we never played with in qualifications.
Oops.
Too bad.
But and it wasn't because it wouldn't necessarily work, but trying it for the first time in a qualification match, there were our robot had a couple of times where we had a mechanical failure that prevented us from climbing, and then there was one time where our partner that was supposed to climb with us, their hook fell off during the match, so that was out the window. And then just stuff happens, right? Somebody doesn't get to the bar quite early enough, or what have you, or it turns out that your robots just can't quite climb next to each other as well as you thought. So it's certainly a more difficult route for getting the RP. I think that it's a consideration for us in playoffs that we do have, there are teams that we can climb next to. But I think it'll be interesting going forward. We chose not to do a buddy climber just because we thought it was kind of overreach for our capabilities. And we'll see how that plays out for us, I think.
What
Do you think it'll get
Francis?
better then? Sorry,
What?
I was just going to ask Evan, do you think it'll get better? Do you think other teams will get to the point where you can work with them?
Yeah, I do. I think we will get it. And I think that the practice matches showed that it's possible. But it's not, I think it may be not quite as reliable of a way to get RP to be your solo climber, as opposed to having a dedicated lift system for a partner, because we can't try it every match, right? Um, so that's the trade-off for us. I hope it gets better. I hope we get a 4 RP match at some point. We've had a few chances throughout our events, and just haven't had things fall our way so far.
Matt, what were you going to say?
So I at Finger Lakes, I would say there were probably a handful to maybe 10 qualification matches that used some sort of buddy climber system. Code Red 639 had an interesting idea. They had buddy bars that came out the sides of their elevator, so they would pivot down to 90 degrees on either side, and then they would be able to have teams that would climb. They were able to do that in at least one that I saw in qualifications. 3003 Tanks had a bar that would then pivot out of their robot, and you would be able to grab on and climb yourselves up, and they were successful a couple times. And I would agree, in qualifications, I think the buddy bar is more useful because it allows you to use whatever mechanism that another team has. They're most likely able to somehow hold on to it. And then in playoffs, I noticed that the alliance that won 340 and 1507, 1507 had the cable winch idea. So they would go up first, they would put their hook up, and they would back off a little bit off the platform. They'd let 340 drive up and grab on. And once they were both lined up next to each other, it was kind of cool. They would wait till they were kind of bumper to bumper, and then they would both climb up at the same time. So that way they didn't really interfere with each other. The argument that I always used was it's always simpler to, if you're designed to allow another robot to get close to the bar, to just let both teams do what they're used to practicing already. It just works out well, and that's what 1507 and 340 was able to do. But then again, in playoffs, you do see the buddy bar system work well. In qualifications, we were able to do it with this team. Maybe we can perfect that and at least get it to work on occasion. Maybe because we're still in week 3, we haven't seen that as much yet. But I suspect that down the road, as teams start working more and more together and we know what people's designs are, they are going to now see modifications to systems so they work better together.
Yeah.
We played a match early in the competition. We played a match with 133. We didn't have time to get to practice field to try it. So they came over and they're like, hey, we're wondering if you wanted to try a double climb with us. We just hook on with a winch, we'll get out of the way, and then you can climb and then we'll climb. and I went over and I looked at their robot, and I honestly think that 133 has developed the best winch bot out there right now. They pull from on high, which means that they're very stable as they go up, but they also they have a very steep slope to the back of their robot that's very smooth with polycarbonate, and it slides right along the bumpers very nicely. So once they hook on, there's you don't have to worry about them hitting anything or lifting anything up, except for us, where our robot, as you saw with our giant leap, can climb really, really high. So we climbed really high, hoping that they would just have enough room to just pull up underneath us. And they had like 2 bolts that were sticking out the back that caught our bumpers and kept lifting us up throughout the climb. So but they still pulled it off. We got 4 ranking points. It was our only 4 ranking point match. And then throughout playoffs, it was just really nice to know that we had that basically 30-second possession buffer of, if we are within 30 seconds of possession for the other team and we climb, we win.
So it's interesting you bring that up, because I want to kind of pose a question to you guys. So at least so far, we've seen a lot of matches where he or she or whatever that holds the scale first tends to be able to hold the scale longest in many matches, right? Except at the top levels of really great scale robots. And when you do that, you end up with the situation where you have a huge lead and you end up kind of carrying it on for a while. How actually important is 2 robots climbing in eliminations? In qualifications, the value is irrespective of points. You get the ranking point, which is a different sort of axis. But like right now, it doesn't matter if 2 robots when we get to the district champs and maybe the championship. How important is that double climb?
I think it goes back to what Ty said earlier, where he said the scores actually go down when the matches are closer. I think in district champs and later on that the scores will be close enough that it does matter. But you're right. When you look up at the scoreboard in the middle of the match right now and you see that you're up by 100 points or so, you're feeling kind of comfortable and you don't have to worry about what's happening on the other side when it's 30 seconds to go and you're up by 100. But as the match scores go down, I think it could become pretty important.
Yeah, I think one thing that's kind of interesting when you get into if one side is outmatched on the scale, it probably doesn't matter so much. But if you're coming into a match where you're fairly even on the scale between alliances, 2 things can happen. One is that the scale can go back and forth. One team can start with it, and then if they make a mistake or drop a couple too many cubes or whatever, then it swings the other way. And kind of there is literal momentum to the scale, not only in how it tilts, right, but also just that whoever has more cubes on the scale has the advantage in holding the scale, as you mentioned. But the other thing that starts to happen is that the scale can spend a significant amount of time not scoring points for anybody. And those are the situations where even if you did own the scale more than the other guys, if it was balanced for a lot of the match, maybe it was balanced the entirety of auto, something like that, having the double climb in your back pocket, or knowing that, okay, we're enough ahead that we could just leave the scale now and go make sure that we've filled out our vault, etc. Because we're within 30 points, and so we're going to be able to use our double climb for the win. It opens up a lot of strategic flexibility.
So Brendan, what are your thoughts? You guys are the buddiest of the people here. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, we are a little worried because of how much time it to ramp. But it's better actually when you have in playoffs a partner who's practiced.
Right.
But the amount of time it takes to get onto a ramp and climb might be the same 30 points lost that you're going to gain by doing the climb. So I don't know. We're going to play it by ear. But I think that the buddy bars, the climb and let climbs, the co-climbs, they're going to start finding their niche, I think, in playoffs in the week 6s, the week 5s, the district champs, because it's nice to have that extra 30 points, but if it costs you 30 points to go get it, 30 points worth of time to go get it, then it's not much use. We were fortunate that most of our playoff matches, we built up a comfortable enough lead that we didn't have to climb too badly. In fact, actually, our last match, we didn't climb because a bolt landed right in the shift coupling of our winch motor, so we couldn't shift into low gear. But it's just, well, we were okay, we were fine. But it's one of those those random faults that if you spent 30 seconds trying to get that climb and then something like that happens, then that guaranteed 30 points isn't guaranteed anymore. Yeah, robots works that way sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing that we that is related but isn't directly what we've been talking about is all four, or rather all three robots being able to climb on an alliance. So what we saw at North Shore with Alliance number 2 is they somehow 6731 fell all the way to the 23rd pick, and they were a robot that had a scale auto, could do scale, had a double switch auto, could do vault, and could climb. And
Y'all got crazy events.
Look, I'm gonna be 100% honest, Ty. This is not the only time I've heard of some bad picks happening. I saw it at my event. I've seen it at other events. I saw it at his event. That's for sure. What is with the people in picking this year? I don't know what it is.
It's a tough. It's like this whole strat. Like, take your strategy book from the previous years of FRC and throw them out. Because
I do that every year.
Because how to play this year isn't just like do the most things anymore. It isn't just like pick the robot that does the most gears and pair it with the robot that does the most gears and the most fuel, and then you win. And this year is like completely different. You have to have synergy, and you have to have an alliance that can work together and be strong in like multiple different ways. So 6731 falls all the way to the 23rd pick, and we watch them. We're on the side of the field watching them, trying to scout them out in case we make finals, and we're watching this robot that can climb and allow the other two best scale robots to continue on the scale. And we're like, how are we gonna compete with that if we have to go off and climb, and 6731 can go and get the 30 points while 125 and 238 just to keep attacking the scale? Like, that's a really powerful alliance.
Yeah. And actually, that leads us into a great question we got in from the chat just a moment ago. This question comes to us from a user, Sneeko. He asked, during alliance selections, do you think it's more important to choose a bot that is a really good scale bot, or a bot that is a decent scale bot but can climb with you?
I would love to take this question, because I saw this exact situation happen at Finger Lakes this weekend. Going into the event, 340 was by far the best scale robot. They won Utica. Their robot's awesome this year, as Ty knows from witnessing what they had to face against at Utica. Everybody thought going into alliance selection that 340 would pick the next best scale robot, which was Hype 5254. Hype is designed very similar to 319, and I was joking with one of their lead mentors, Kevin, at the event, because their strategy looked very similar to how I saw Big Bad Bob operate at Utica too. And so everybody assumed that they would pick Hype, and out of nowhere, they decided to pick the Warlocks 1507, which was a decent scale robot, but they were the team that was able to grab the bar with a rope style system, back away, let 340 climb, and then they would climb up right next to each other, bumper to bumper. And we didn't really understand it at the time, why that pick was what it was, until we started seeing their climb be so work so well together. So yeah, I do think that having robots that can do other things like climbing together well will influence who you pick.
Okay. I think it's interesting. I think that that's a pretty bold strategy by 340 for sure, right? Because you gotta trust that your team alone can beat any team of two good scale robots, right? Because if you can't beat the presumably second best and third best scale robot by yourself with help from some ancillary other robots, you're going to lose the scale and you're not going to have a chance for them, right?
Yep.
Right, but
Yeah.
1507 was actually fairly okay at scale. So it's not like it was just 340 versus the
Right.
world.
50 hype was definitely faster at the scale. The Warlocks could do it without much problem, but they were a little bit slower. So it was one of those, you're picking somebody that's a little bit slower at getting the cubes up high, but you can climb well together. So if that's really needed when the scores are close, then they'll be okay. It was interesting to see because everybody thought and everybody heard going into it that it was not going to go that way.
Yeah, and I think it goes into that 30 seconds of possession advantage where 340 and 52-54 might have been the best possible scale alliance, but were they 30 seconds of possession better than any other possible scale alliance at Tech Valley or Finger Lakes? I don't know. I haven't watched many matches or any matches from there yet. So, when you're trying to build the alliance, you may not be. You're trying to build the best alliance you can relative to all other alliances because that's what matters, right? So, they went in and they're like, okay, we can win the scale battle with 1507, but can we win the scale battle and outclimb 1507 if we're facing them?
Yeah, I think Stephanie's chiming in from the background here, and I'll say what she's adding, that just having the strategic flexibility and the threat of a double climb forces your opponents to have to get 30 points ahead on the scale in order to feel comfortable with their lead, and so that puts a huge amount of pressure on your opponents to not only win the scale battle but dominate the scale battle. Um, and so I think that her point is even if you don't use it, right, that just having that threat and Ty's point is pretty much exactly that. Like 340 may just have been in a position where, like, look, we would rather just not face the prospect of having to go up against 1507 and another climber, knowing that us plus hype has to beat that, not just beat it, but beat it by at least 30 points. And if they're not confident that they're going to be able to do that, then maybe you have to make that bold decision.
So
Brendan, what was it like
Yeah.
in Canada? Was that a similar situation, or was it pretty clear cut who the top robots were and who could work well together?
There was a pretty, at least by our scouting data, that our scouting system worked out so well, a pretty clear level of order of scale bots and then into switch bots. The point where once we had locked in the top scale bot, we weren't even looking for scale bot for the second pick. We just wanted someone who would be small and light and would fit on the ramp and fill the vault super fast, and then do that in enough time to start blocking the portals so that we could fend off an away switch attack.
It's not too much to ask, right?
Yeah, it's just all those things. Can you just have that? It worked out pretty well. I don't know if I would have made the same choice as 340. I don't. I like all those teams. We used to go down to Pittsburgh and we go down to Ruckus every year and see them. So I don't want to pick favorites, but Hype is a great robot. And I'll tell you, getting an early lead is everything, right? Because leads build leads in this game. So if you can get out there and hold a 3 cube lead on the scale, then you can walk away for 10 seconds and hassle another team who's trying to come back, right? Or hassle a team that's going to the portal, or you'll go and steal some of the away landfill and just give them a hard time. And meanwhile, your scores are still catching up. I can give you an example. Our finals match 1, we were able to get 3 cubes on our home switch really fast, and then we just parked ourselves in front of the portal and to take one of your top bots, the number 1 seed, and stick it and do nothing all match in another game, in another FRC game, would be suicide, right? But it was the exact right play, and my student drive coach, Maddie, invented it, as far as I know. At least I'd never seen it before, and we'd never talked about it before. And it just shut down our opponents, and they sat and tried to push through us for a good 20 seconds. And meanwhile, we were taking 20 seconds of points. It was brilliant. It was great. It was wonderful.
That's really good idea, actually.
Oh yeah, yeah, and there's not a pin because you're
Right.
just sitting there.
Yep.
So getting that early lead, getting there as fast as possible, and is worth more to me than being a little slower and being able to do other things. Because getting early leads gives you the freedom to do other things.
Yeah, I'm kind of more in Brendan's camp on this one. But I mean, to the credit of 340, they did win, so good on them, I guess, right? So Evan, real quick, you want to add something? I think.
Yeah, I mean, that is exactly what Apex and Skunkworks and Lions Alliance did in finals, or at least what we were attempting to do. And we were pretty successful with it in final match 1. Up to that point, we'd had Lions start with the exchange. And going into finals, we knew we had to take a lead on the scale to have any chance against Bare Metal and Sodabots. So we had them start off by trying to play some defense and slow them down. And our objective was get 2 to 3 cubes ahead on the scale, and then Apex would break off. And so if you watch Final 1, we actually let the Blue Alliance take the scale back at about 40 seconds left in the match. But during the time that they're taking it back, we've gotten cubes through the exchange. And as soon as they take it back, we play force. And so it's like, okay, you took it back, but now you don't actually have it back. And now you've spent all this time putting cubes on the scale that aren't helping you. And we just solidified the win.
Yes, I saw a masterful play like that as well at Springfield this weekend down in Mar. It was actually quite well done, and it's a good use of that force power up even when you think you're winning. I'd like to do 2 things first. First, I want to tell everybody in chat, last call for questions. We're going to go into our lightning round very shortly. So if you got questions for us, send them into the chat with !Q and then your question. We'll pick it up and talk about it on air. But really quick, while we're waiting for everybody to put in their last minute questions, I want to kind of talk a little bit for a couple of minutes about refereeing this year. You know, we've seen a few weeks of this, and refereeing this year's game, I think, is easier than we've had in some years, but it tends to, because of the way the rules are written, escalate to things being very, very dangerous very quickly. Matt, you talked about this a little bit before the show. Why don't you tell us what your thoughts are?
Yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a matter of figuring out where your head ref stands and making sure that it's called consistent at your event. At Utica, it was pretty lenient, I would say, where unless there was a major scale change, as an example, where it actually changed positions, you were okay kind of bumping into it, kind of maybe making it jerk a little bit up and down, but you were okay unless there was a major change. And then I saw at Finger Lakes while we were there that any sort of movement by the scale up or down would warrant a penalty. And again, the rules are written vague for that reason, because it's a head ref decision. And as long as it's consistent, it's something to consider and know where your ref stands, so you know what you need to make sure you do at the event.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's tough. I think if you get let's say, if you get the wrong ref, or I don't know how to phrase it, but if you get a ref that'll call like incidental changes that essentially have no effect, like you run into the scale and touch it and it doesn't change the state at all, and that's a tech foul, then like that's pretty rough. I think there's ways that you can design this rule such that it's still like disincentivizes, there's just no word, people from touching the scale, such as like one example that came up in discussions I've seen all over the internet is something like, if it's incidental contact that does not change the state, then it's a foul, but if it changes the state to the other side, then it's a tech foul. See something like that. The tough part for me is like, you definitely want only the scales, only the weight of the cubes to change the scales, and like that's how this game needs to be played. And if it's played in any other way, then it's broken. So you need like very strict penalties, but also it's slightly panicked high school kids driving robots that they built in 6 weeks.
But
Yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
the game is designed well that the scale plates interfere when kids are trying to drive the robots on the platform to climb. It wasn't just our team. I saw lots of teams. They start bringing their elevators up to get up near the bar, but the scale is there, and the depth perception is really goofy if you stood behind the glass, and that's hard to see. So there were a lot of incidental contacts, just people raising their elevator to try and get a hook up high. So the field was designed to cause those penalties to come in for not even trying to score a cube at the same time.
Yeah, I think we got a warning, I believe, at Auburn, because we were too close to the scale on the downside when we raised our arm one time and thwacked it, and we didn't do it again. It was but it meant that we had to be a lot more careful when we were going to go climb because if we were too far forward or whatever, or trying to go up ramps or something, like that's going up somebody's side ramps and trying to have any kind of height whatsoever is next to impossible because you don't have the depth perception to tell if you're going to hit it or not.
There were moments where I got very frustrated in a match, and I accidentally told my driver, "Get depth perception." He can't
Right now.
He can't just go get. He can't get that. He can't just.
Yes.
Oh crap! I forgot to turn that on.
My bit that I'll say is that the challenge to this game is that there is no way to undo the automatic scoring, right?
Yeah.
So you have to be that two things. One is that they'll give you a warning before you get a yellow card, and then you get a whole nother set of warnings before getting a red card, right? And also, I saw this happen down at the district I was at, 225, which was the best robot at the event. They, in their first match on Sunday, got a yellow card because warned and still bumped the scale. Second match, did it again, got another yellow card, as is predicted by the rules, got in which gave them a red. And then the third match, touched the scale once, still put up the same number of cubes, right? I'm firmly of belief that if your robot and driver team are skilled enough, you can avoid these penalties. And
I don't disagree.
So
I don't disagree, but unfortunately, I think that it's the kind of thing which disproportionately affects the teams that aren't skilled enough, and gives a negative experience if you're like, it's basically saying if you're not good enough, you can't do the scale because you'll get red carded.
This has always been a pet peeve of mine. To be fair, that's what everyone in Chief Delphi has been telling people to do since day zero of this competition, right? If you're not good enough, build a robot that just does a switch, right? So I don't know. Anyway, we'll move on to the rapid fire questions here. Guys, thank you for sending in all your questions in the chat. We're going to close questions for now, unless they're really, really good. So I'll put the good ones in. First question coming up here, up on the screen. This comes from, let's see here. Coming up, it's I believe it's from Azaltoth __. I got it right this time. Do you think the scoreboard should have an area to indicate climbs? Right now, there's a lot of uncertainty in the end of matches regarding whether or not a ref has clicked the climb button or on the console or not. Brendan, what are your thoughts on this?
Sure. It's like last year, you the animation to see whether the climb got counted or not, because everyone wants to sort of double check. It doesn't bother me too much because there's always some last minute points. We were talking about here in the chat about other displays. I would rather see a bar graph on the score so that my drivers can see where the score is headed 5 seconds from now. That's the score. That's the display I want to see, but it's probably not going to happen.
I really do. Pet peeve of mine. It's been a pet peeve of mine since 2016 when they didn't show climbs and robots on the batter. It's like if you're not going to legally be allowed to assess the climbs until the end of the match, you shouldn't be able to enter climbs before the end of the match. And if you're going to, for God's sake, please put something on the scoreboard, because I know that we've seen the buzzer and not been sure who's going to win because We don't know which climbs are counted, and they get counted differently on different sides because it's different refs. So I feel strongly about it.
Matt, did you have something to say about this too? I think.
Oh, I would love to talk about cube starvation.
Oh, excuse me. All right. So, speaking of cube starvation, what a great best of segues here. Our next question coming up here is about cube starvation. This comes in from M.W. McLean. He or she asked, as cube starvation becomes more important in the coming weeks, should first consider adding more cubes to the portal for the championship. Matt, what are your thoughts?
So sometimes I come up with wild and crazy ideas. My answer would be no, because I've started to see where we're starting to run out of cubes, and I totally get where the argument could come in. But I think we're forgetting a higher level of strategy where we may start to see teams move cubes at certain points. It is allowed, as far as I have been able to tell and from talking to people, that you are allowed to descore your own cubes. So you could start seeing teams move cubes around to try and better help the point values later on in matches. Now, I know maybe we'll never see it, I don't know, but I could see that being another layer of complex strategy that could start happening if scores are starting to get super, super close.
Interesting. So what you're saying is, like, say for example, you control your switch with like 3 cubes, and the opponent has 2 on there or whatever. You can take one off in the last few seconds and score it in your exchange to get the levitate, and then you'll have the last 10 seconds or so without your switch being scored, right?
Correct. Or as even simpler than that, if you have 6 on your side and they have 4 on the other, technically with physics, you should be able to remove one and still have the advantage to put it somewhere else. Maybe we'll start seeing it. I don't know, but I wonder what Evan would think about maybe just adding a couple of cubes would do the same thing.
I don't think that adding cubes to the portals will help because, as Brendan just mentioned, the portal is probably the single hardest place on the field to get additional cubes from, and I'm not sure that you're going to see alliances that are proficient enough to empty out the portals of cubes. And then on top of that, if you do have an alliance that's efficient enough, go put a robot in front of their portal, and now they're not efficient enough.
Yeah.
So I don't think that more cubes behind the portals is the answer to cube starvation, because those are not easy to access cubes to start with.
I think I keep coming back to this every week, but it's a fact of the game that as the game goes on or as the match goes on, cubes are worth less and less. So adding more cubes onto the end of the train has less and less of impact. I think it's more important to basically, or rather, I think it'd be more important for teams to start figuring out what is the best place to put this cube and what is the most effective way to use this cube, so that you've maximized your potential when that starvation does happen.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I mean, and by the way, nobody asked any questions about this on the Q&A again this week. We don't want 2 in a row. By the way, last week, if you watched the show, I brought up that it is theoretically possible for a coach to roll the rollers on the inbound station, and somebody from Team 1712 asked that question in the Q&A. Thankfully, the Q&A came through in favor of me. So yes, if your coach is out there, you may continue to roll those rollers and make that noise all you want. So otherwise, no more Q&As, please. We don't want to get a reputation for that. All right, so we're going to ask another more salient question here coming up. This question comes from user Max5254, and they are asking, what level of auto will be required to be a competitive scale robot come championship? And I would say you definitely have to reach at least to the scale. That's for sure. But Brendan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, 2. We have to spend a lot of time between now and our next scale auto. The 2 scale auto. Getting out ahead early is the name of the game. I don't know if we'll need 3 to be really super locking the lead, but 2 for sure.
And I think a really good alliance at championship will need 2 double cube auto potentials so that you can have one on one side, one on the other side, and then hopefully your third partner has a switch auto to maximize those points. Because I think if you have the ability to do 2, then you're in good shape. If you have the ability to do 2 on either side, then you're in great shape. And if you're 254, then you're already way ahead of everybody else.
I think a underappreciated autonomous mode, it doesn't eclipse the 2 cube auto ability, but an underappreciated scale autonomous mode is the one that goes all the way into the null territory to place the cube, or so that you can have both robots start on each side, and you're going to get all the starting cubes into the scale. One of them will run a 1 cube on their side, and the other one maybe runs a 2 cube opposite, or something. But just have the ability to get past your partner into the null territory could be a really useful one.
Yeah, we saw a really effective use of that with North Shore, the number 2 alliance. 238 would go into the null zone, 125 would run from the side and try to do a 2 cube. Worked out most of the time. It even got to the point where 1058 wanted to join the party from the opposing alliance and went in and tossed a cube on unfortunately the wrong side of the scale. But that's it. It's a triple cube auto nonetheless, I guess.
That's
Still
true.
counts.
Still counts. Yep. All right. We're gonna go just a couple more questions here. Our next question that comes from user in the chat. Their name is _single_. They ask, with so many good scale bots in the field, how do you differ them from each other? And I'm going to start off with that. And this is going to sound kind of lame, perhaps. At least at all the events that I've been at, I've had a gut feel as to which of the scale bots is the best. I'm sure, Brendan, at your event this weekend, you also had a pretty strong gut feeling as to who was the best scale bot at your event. But I don't know. To me, maybe just being an old man and seeing a lot of first robots, I can kind of tell which ones are actually better than the rest of them. But what are your guys' opinions?
We just look at their data. We have a great online data system this year for scouting that we can pull up just the number of cubes run as we go through the tournament. And teams that, honestly, actually I've been surprised this year. Teams that build robots that I wouldn't think would be enough. Teams that, for instance, don't reach up to the 8-foot level to get on that second level, but they've tuned in their little punch shot so that when they go to the top of their elevator, they just kick it the last little bit. Surprised us. And so 5719 out of Toronto was able to do that really well. So I think you can't just go by gut. I think you have to look at the numbers.
Okay,
fine. One of the big things that we pay attention to is missed cubes, right? That if you're a robot that maybe is a little bit slower, but you are a lot more accurate, that's something that we're going to differentiate from a robot that's the same speed or a little bit faster, but has a tendency to miss cubes. And just overall control and placement. It's hard to see. We talked about this earlier, but it's hard to see in qualification matches sometimes which teams are able to really control where they're placing cubes and which teams aren't, because there's rarely enough cubes on the scale for that to matter. But that's a big differentiating factor as well.
I think when you get to the point where volume is more or less the same, well, I'll put it this way: the 2 vocabulary words that we're using on 319 are like volume and dexterity. In that, we're basically, once volume's the same, you want to go for those teams that can neatly stack the first level such that it's easier to put cubes on the second level and maybe even the third level. Robots that can like just crush the scale with cubes on the first level, but do so in a haphazard way that makes the second level really precarious. They're basically going to have to find a way to make it neat come these incredibly high levels of play like district championships.
Say that as you describe that, it sounds more like a D&D character sheet than a robot scouting form, but
I was going to say, which D20 did you roll?
yeah. I have I have a 16 in strength and a 4 in dexterity. Oh, no.
Well, no,
All
yeah,
right.
we go over there and we install the green Indy Mark wheels, and it's like dexterity plus 10.
Right.
All right, we got one final question coming up here on screen now. Question comes from our user Bartholomew. Bartholomew asks, "Can you ask my first question?" And I'm afraid we can't actually. So sorry about that, Bartholomew. But thank you for your question anyway. I want to, before we end for the night, I thank you so much, Brendan, for joining us on the show. You've been a great guest, and we're really excited to see what you're doing for the rest of the hopefully at the championship this year.
Yeah, we've got a lot of plans. We keep at it. We've got a lot of competition up here too, so it's gonna be fun.
Awesome. All right. Well, I want to thank the rest of the guests, everybody in the chat. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what we do, why don't you make sure you follow us here on YouTube or on Twitch? And if you really like what we do, we appreciate it if you guys wanted to subscribe to our channel. We have a wonderful sponsor, Symbotic. They do a lot of awesome stuff for us. But your support through Twitch also helps us out and does all the cool things we do, like all the live events, like First Champ Live, like Chessy Champs, Beach Blitz, IRI, all that kind of stuff. So if you like this, go ahead and subscribe to us here on Twitch. And if you've got Amazon Prime, it's free. So if you're able to, think about it. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this week. A big thank you to everybody once again, including Ruth and Stephanie behind the scenes. And for that, I wish everybody out there good luck the rest of the season, the rest of this week, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye for now.